Hello, I'm Ashley Vance. I'm a writer with Business Week, and as far as the panels about the future go, our job is to talk about the future of the car and specifically what self-driving technology might mean to the user experience and to product design. And we have a perfect panel for that. This is George Hotz, famous hacker, and as it happens, the founder and CEO of Comma AI, which is building a self-driving car. David Bellow is the technical lead for McLaren Applied Technologies and is looking at some of the ways McLaren can bring their technology to this arena. And Yves Bahar is a designer extraordinaire who's designed many of the products that we use. Just as by way of a little background, we're going to show a video in a second, but George and I met at the end of last year. I got a note that said, from a friend who said that there's this guy in San Francisco in his garage, and he's built a self-driving car in about a month, and it seemed sort of unbelievable, but George was kind enough to let me come see the first car and go for one of the first rides in the car. We did a big story in Business Week, and a video that went with it sort of took on a life of its own. And so this will be a short version of the video we did, just 3 minutes to give you a taste.
I'm George Hotz, and I'm about to be the next billion-dollar CEO. I don't know what else you want.
George Hotz came onto the scene as a 17-year-old hacking phenomenon. He was the first person to break open the iPhone and the first person to hack Sony's PlayStation. He spent a few years working odd jobs around Silicon Valley and competing in security competitions. Now, after 2 years in virtual hiding, he's come out to show the world what might be his greatest invention yet.
You can doubt, and you should doubt. I doubt everyone who says everything, but once I see it, you can't doubt anymore, right?
How do you tap into the car's internal controls?
So we bought for $40 off Amazon Chinese CAN transceivers. There's actually one right there. And we can see all the messages being sent between the components. That's how we're reading the steering angle. And we can also send our own messages, which are going to tell the car to actually turn the steering wheel or to apply the brakes when it's appropriate.
Is it hard to tap into all that, or that's what a mechanic would do today, have access to the same kind of system?
The actual whole car is on the debugging port of the car. So we just have a wire plugged into the debugging port, just like a mechanic would do.
It just seems crazy to me that you can, I mean, not anyone could do it, you obviously know what you're doing, but that you can kind of just plug into the car and then start getting all the feeds from the steering wheel, the pedals, the turn signal.
Modern cars are very electronic and computers, and you ask, like, I mean, I know a bit about cars, but I'm not like a real car guy, but I'm a computer guy. Cars are computers. When you get on the highway, press this one, and always remember, if you don't like what the car is doing, press cancel, and it'll give you full manual control back. Go ahead.
Here goes nothing, man.
Press it.
Good?
Yeah, good. Like it?
Jesus. That is amazing, man. It is hard to commit yourself that this is going to work.
He's very safe following distance, the car in front of you.
This is driving, man. I gotta be honest. I mean, I didn't think it was gonna be that good. Like when I drive with you, usually it's just really hard for me to tell.
For you to tell how much the computer is doing. Exactly why I wanted to let you drive.
That is crazy. So that was. If you guys want, on YouTube, there's about like a 7 or 8 minute version of that. That was December, and you'd been working on the car for like 4 or 5, 6 weeks, I think, at that point?
A little bit longer than that.
So
about 3 months.
About 3 months. And after that came out, Elon Musk got very upset. He said what George was doing was impossible, but then some other people in Silicon Valley definitely took notice. George just got about $3 million in funding from Andreessen Horowitz a couple weeks ago. I mean, why don't you tell us, so it's April now, how's your car different from what we saw up there?
So look, I mean, the question isn't whether I can build a self-driving car or not. The question is whether I can ship a self-driving car to you or not, right? And that's what we're trying to do. We're actually trying to ship a product by the end of the year for under $1,000. It's true. It's true. But where we are right now, the software's gotten a lot better.
Why don't you explain a little bit how yours is different to, like, buying a Tesla that already has everything built in?
One of the reasons we can do it with so few people is we did not explicitly tell the car how to drive. Imagine getting a checklist and writing every single thing down you need to know in order how to drive a car. You can't really do it. But how did we learn to drive? By watching people drive. My car learned to drive in the same way.
And you're basically building a kit that people could put into their car.
Something like that. But yes, it will be aftermarket. Obviously, we're not selling you cars for under $1,000. It will work in your existing car if you have a common car.
And so you've got kind of the startup effort to build these self-driving cars. You've got companies like Tesla, and obviously all the German automakers have been at this for a while. As far as somewhere like McLaren comes in, well, I was hoping maybe you could just tell a little bit about the group that you work for at McLaren, and then sort of why you guys are interested in this.
So I work for McLaren. Some of you may know McLaren for Formula One and our racing team. Other people know us for high-performance cars. I work for another part of the company that's called McLaren Applied Technologies. And we're sort of a special projects division, and we work in a multitude of technology problems, basically. So we try to take projects we take on projects that benefit from what we think is the DNA and the culture that we've developed on track. So self-driving cars is an example, but as is high-performance design to bicycles to other transportation needs in railway and aviation.
And tell me a little bit about, how does something, from the Formula One world potentially trickle down to consumer cars and self-driving cars in particular?
We're interested in the high-performance side of the self-driving car problem. It's a technology problem, a big data problem, and for us, the biggest impetus is safety. There's a big problem with transportation today, especially automotive, and some people know about the statistics. 30 to 40,000 people die on the roads in the U.S. alone a year, but in a worldwide setting, it's 1.2 million, which is hard to comprehend. That's one commercial jet airliner falling out of the sky every hour of the year. So this is sort of a big problem that takes really specialized technology to make these cars safer. And as strange as it may sound, racing cars and avoiding an accident have a lot in common. So
the idea would be to sort of take what you guys learn from these really intense situations.
The skills involved in making a car go fast around the track are similar to the skills that you would need to tackle really specific problems. Making a car go around the track is about exploiting the limits of acceleration, deceleration, turning, and those are the same limits you're exploiting when you're trying to avoid an oncoming car or something unprecedented happens and you need to rely on models that understand the physics of the problem and predict something that's never really happened before. And you need to not just maybe hit the brakes, you need to accelerate, do a complicated maneuver in order to minimize the risk of injury. So reliance on these sorts of big models, which is something that we focused in the automotive and motorsport world a lot, come to prominence.
Yves, I know, when we talked a little bit before this, the thing that hit me the most, I guess, was just, you said the UI experience inside of cars today is pretty crap, I think. And Tesla seems like the first company that really tried something a little bit different with the screen and a new kind of experience. Is this like an exciting time for you with now that these things are turning into gadgets?
It's definitely the most exciting time, and I'm so glad these two gentlemen here are working on it. In many ways, cars, home, and health is probably where designers have the most to do, have the most opportunities going forward. Technology is enabling, data is enabling that. So when I think about cars, I think about passion. When I think about home, I think about love. When I think about health, I think about care. Those are like three really important things we shouldn't fuck up, in my opinion. So, so we should work really, really hard at it. We should work at the way we interface with it, with the way that we experience these things. We should make them successful, because the price of not making technologies successful is essentially they get relegated. And if you think about the death count that you just described, and how these things are so important in our lives, these are the three subjects I would probably spend the rest of my life working on if I'm allowed to.
Were you ever excited? People spend so much time on the outside of cars, but it seems like the inside has been not neglected. I mean, some companies do interesting things, but certainly not sort of, this great explosion of design and technologies. Is that something that's kind of getting interesting to you now?
Well, if you think about the amount of energy we've put, as far as technology is concerned, into the office, for example, and how little, really cars, have how little technology they've really gotten. I mean, yes, they're technological objects, but they haven't really, we haven't spent the kind of energy that a Microsoft or an Apple has spent on cars, outside of producing them and shipping them. And if so now there is finally an opportunity to do that. But what I also find interesting is the connectivity between cars and the home. Those two elements are these personal experiences, very personal, sometimes singular experiences. And those two areas, in my opinion, have gotten the least amount of energy and focus when it comes to user experience and when it comes to new technology and new development, until recently. Now there's excitement around cars and the home in particular, and so that's why I think it's a great time.
What do you think along those lines? You got Tesla that's tried some things. Apple's said to be making a car. How do you expect the traditional automakers to respond? Will they be quick and radical, or will they sort of keep the steady path?
Well, I mean, I don't know who said that. You probably know, George, but creative destruction is something that happens if you stay passive, right? You eventually self-destruct because other people will come about. People who have the kind of swagger that Elon Musk has, or George, and people who will sort of come in and say, "Look, I can do it better. I know I can, because I have the skills, I have the technology, I have maybe the design skills, or I know how to connect with people better or differently." There's a whole generation of people that when it comes to the way they relate to their home or the way they relate to their cars, is completely different from the way those industries have been built. So this is part of why being here is so much fun, because we may create and we may destroy all at the same time.
Yeah. And George, so far, a lot of what you've been doing is taking kind of off-the-shelf technology and this amazing AI software and kind of retrofitting existing cars. When you start thinking about how good the AI software is getting, and where does your head go as to what the future of a car might look like?
The real innovation is not the latest, newest technologies. It's last year's latest, newest technologies made smaller and shipped. Where the future of the car is, I don't think about the future beyond the end of this year when we're going to ship our product. Maybe next year we'll ship an even better product too. How about that? Just like Apple, you ship a better product every year.
But you're a clever guy on this AI stuff. I mean, your mind never wanders to what the things we could take out of current cars, or how we could change them to be even.
Honestly, let's build the tech first. Let's build the actual self-driving tech before we say, "Oh, look, it's a car that drives backwards and forwards the same, and all the seats can swivel." This is actually a company called Zoox. Look them up. How much time do you spend going backwards in a car? None. Why would you optimize for that use case? You wouldn't. But the CEO is not an engineer.
So Zoox, they have some ideas about, the car could sense an accident coming with these cameras and sort of like have airbags around the outside.
Oh,
of the car.
airbags around the outside of the car. Oh. Well, why don't we just, run better models and avoid the accident to begin with?
Yeah.
That's actually a really good point. We have, like, the automotive industry right now is completely constrained by regulations and actually also by the fact that a large part of the system that we traditionally have been accounting for, we know very little about, which was the human driver. So those two things constrained what we did with cars to a large degree. And if you remove the driver, and if you now statistically, if you follow thoughts to conclusion, and statistically the likelihood of accidents is much lower because we have all these active systems. We don't need to rely on passive systems, crash structures, things that make it likelier that we won't get hurt in an accident after we get into an accident. If we get rid of those things, then you could imagine regulations also getting relaxed. And if regulations get relaxed, car design is going to change.
And so if you assume, say this stuff works, and you can assume that you're going to get into less accidents and the passengers are at less risk and bystanders are at less risk, what sort of design changes might you be able to make to the car?
Well, as a concrete example, there is a very specific constraint on the hood of a car that if you sell a car in the United States, the height of the hood of a car is constrained to how low it could be and how high it could be based on what happens when you strike a pedestrian. And it limits what you do with the front of the car from an engineering point of view. If that didn't exist, cars would look very different, and you'd optimize that for energy efficiency and for mass, and there's hundreds of examples like that.
So you guys, do you think there will be when I was in the car and I sort of take my hands off the wheel, it took me a second to kind of process what I was doing, and it was uncomfortable, and then pretty quickly, you feel the car go around a corner really fast, and it does a good job, and you feel okay with it. You like sort of trust in the computer, almost disturbingly so. Do you think there'll be sort of a generational acceptance of this technology as we move forward? How do you think consumers are going? How is this going to play out with consumers?
People trust things really fast. The second they see it work once, they're like, looks pretty good.
Then
maybe it messes up, they get scared for a little, but then they forget.
I agree, especially in the context of the fact that people of all ages can't really be trusted behind the wheel of a car. They clearly are not that interested in driving because we're all on our phones texting. So we should give them that opportunity if that's what's important for them to do at that particular time.
What do you guys think if the stuff works perfectly? What's the top speed that people will be comfortable letting their cars drive themselves?
Just to address one point of that you just mentioned, works perfectly. It's never going to work perfectly. There's always going to be accidents, and I think the important thing is to realize how much better will it be than we are right now, and we're in a really poor state. So it just needs to be an order or two magnitude better, and if you look at it with a clear mind, if you know that you are 1,000, 10, 100,000 times likelier to not get into an accident in one of these self-driving cars, then why wouldn't you adopt it?
In other words, media, don't freak out after the first fatality. Look at the statistics,
What do you think about you've been in the car a lot. What do you think people will be sort of comfortable with as far as the user experience goes?
Well, I believe here it is. You can use it, you can not use it. It will never override you. You're in charge. It's here to help you out.
No, but as far as how fast we're going on the freeways.
I don't know. The cops will pull you over if you go faster than 75. See, we're going to ship by the end of the year. I don't see speed limits changing by the end of the year. I don't know. I've gone real fast on highways.
What do you think the user experience is going to be like inside of the car when you have all this free time? I guess my mind goes to this horrible scenario where you have to watch advertisements to get cheap gas or to turn on your software. What do you think people will do with this?
Well, I have a few years of experience driving electric cars, and what I find, there's definitely sort of the world of computers, a world of screens and menus and windows and opening and closing and sort of that world and the world of driving, which are not the same two worlds. Sometimes it does feel that whoever designed those interfaces designed them while sitting at their desks looking at a screen. They should really have had to design them while driving a car, or sort of very quickly tested them in that way. I think there's something really different, because in a car the needs, I think, are immediate. They're instantaneous. You can't wait for things to load. You can't wait for things to move. You can't wait for things to adjust. And in many ways, you do want the interface to be fast and not always rely on a screen, for example. I mean, every time I look at a screen, I do take my eyes off the road. And maybe the only time I need to look at a screen, or I need to sort of figure out what's going on when my hands are not on the wheel, is actually probably the most important time, right? So where that response time has to be the most immediate, the quickest. That button on the steering wheel that George was showing you, I mean, should be like, a giant, hit the button, So it's easy to find, or like I just have. There are things like this.
I didn't design that UX.
I had a ton more questions, but I think we've run out of time. I guess we've obviously learned that George is going to be shipping his product by the end of this year.
Comma.ai, go to the website.
We will be, I think George and I are planning to do a road trip with the car here in the next month or so.
Sign up for the beta of our product, too, on Comma.ai, the website. Click beta sign up. Very easy.
And so thank you guys very much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.